Drake Passage Uncharted, the hidden power beneath the Southern Ocean. Drake Passage does not need darkness or legend to feel intimidating. All it takes is a ship entering the water between Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula. The land disappears behind gray distance. The wind has almost nothing to stop it. Waves can travel across thousands of kilometers of open Southern Ocean before they meet the hull. The sky lowers, the sea hardens, and beneath the surface, something even larger is moving. This is not only a rough stretch of water. It is one of the great ocean gateways of Earth, a narrow opening between South America and Antarctica, where the Atlantic Pacific and Southern Ocean are tied together by current, wind depth, and climate. On the surface, Drake Passage is famous for waves, but its true power lies below the waves, where the Antarctic Circumpolar Current moves around Antarctica and squeezes through this gap like a river without banks. It carries water, heat, salt, nutrients, and energy through one of the most important choke points in the global ocean. This is why Drake Passage is uncharted in a deeper sense. It has been mapped, ships cross it, satellites watch it, research vessels measure it, but the forces beneath it eddies mixing deep currents. Seafloor steering and climate connections are still difficult to fully understand. So what is really hidden beneath the waves of Drake Passage? Why can one passage between two continents become so violent, so important, and so difficult to predict? And how can a remote stretch of water near Antarctica influence the circulation, climate, and life of the entire planet? Welcome to Ocean Discovery, your gateway to the beauty, mystery, and power of the ocean. Hit like and subscribe to keep entering oceans where the real power is often beneath the surface, because today we are entering Drake Passage, where the Southern Ocean reveals one of its most powerful hidden machines. A narrow gate between two worlds. Why Drake Passage is different. Drake Passage begins with geography. Between the southern tip of South America and the Antarctic Peninsula, the continents pull apart just enough to leave a deep, cold, storm-shaped corridor. On a map, it may look like a gap. In oceanography, it is much more than that. It is one of the most important gateways in the global ocean. To the north lies Cape Horn, the last wild edge of South America. To the south, the Antarctic Peninsula reaches upward from a frozen continent. Between them is a passage roughly 1,000 kilometers wide enough to swallow ships into open water, but narrow enough to squeeze the greatest current on Earth through a confined region. This is what makes Drake Passage different. It is not simply empty water between two coasts. It is a meeting place of ocean basins, wind belts, deep water, and seafloor structure. It connects the Atlantic and Pacific sides of the Southern Ocean. It sits in the path of winds that circle the planet. It channels the Antarctic Circumpolar Current through a place where the flow becomes easier to study, but not easy to understand. The landscape around it adds to the feeling of isolation. There are no warm harbors nearby, no tropical islands, no protective continental walls. The passage lies near the latitudes sailors once named with fear and respect: the roaring 40s, the furious 50s, and the screaming 60s, regions where westerly winds can run around the planet with very little land to interrupt them. But the deeper importance of Drake Passage is not only weather, it is structure. Here, ocean water moving around Antarctica is forced through the space between two continents. The passage becomes a choke point, a place where a vast current open wind, deep basin submarine ridges, and polar water masses interact. Above, a traveler sees waves and gray sky. Below, scientists see a dynamic system of fronts, eddies mixing pressure and transport. This is why the word Uncharted fits not as a claim that the place is unknown on maps, but as a reminder that mapping is not the same as understanding. A chart can show depth. A satellite can show sea surface height. A research vessel can measure temperature and salinity. But beneath Drake Passage, the ocean is always changing. Water masses shift. Eddies form and disappear. Deep flow interacts with the seafloor. Wind changes the surface. And the Southern Ocean turns all of this into a climate engine. Drake Passage is special because it is both a route and a machine. For ships, it is a crossing. For the planet, it is a moving gateway. And to understand why this gateway matters, we have to meet the force that gives it its hidden power, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the giant river around Antarctica. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current is the main character beneath the surface of Drake Passage. It does not look like a river from above. There are no banks, no trees, no visible channel cutting through land. But in the ocean, it behaves like a planetary river flowing endlessly around Antarctica from west to east, connecting the Atlantic Pacific and Indian Ocean sectors of the Southern Ocean. It is the only major current on Earth that can circle the planet without being blocked by continents. That freedom gives it power. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current, often called the ACC, is widely described as the strongest ocean current in the world. Through Drake Passage observations have estimated its transport at more than 100 spheredrup. One spheredrup is 1 million cubic meters of water per second. That means the flow through this passage is not just stronger than any river on land. It belongs to a completely different scale of motion. To imagine it, think of a river so wide that it has no shore, so deep that it fills the water column, and so powerful that it helps connect the world's major ocean basins. That is the ACC. As it moves around Antarctica, it carries heat, salt, nutrients, dissolved gases, and energy. It separates colder Antarctic waters from warmer waters farther north, while also allowing exchange between deep and surface layers. It is not a simple belt of water moving in one smooth line. It contains fronts, jets, meanders, eddies, and regions where water is stirred and mixed. When this current reaches Drake Passage, the geography narrows its path. The space between South America and Antarctica forces the flow through a constricted gateway. This is one reason Drake Passage has become such an important place for scientists. Measuring the ACC here helps reveal how much water is moving, how the current changes, and how the Southern Ocean participates in global circulation. On the surface, a person crossing Drake Passage sees waves. But below those waves, hundreds of millions of cubic meters of water are moving every second. This hidden flow is the real meaning of power in this story. The power is not only in a storm hitting the ship, it is in the constant motion of a current that helps regulate heat, carbon, nutrients, and deep water exchange across the global ocean. The ACC also helps explain why the Southern Ocean feels so different from other oceans. It links basins that elsewhere would be separated. It allows water masses to move around Antarctica in a continuous path. It makes the Southern Ocean not only a place, but a connector. Drake Passage is the narrowest major gateway in that connector. A ship may cross it in days. The current beneath it has been shaping ocean circulation for millions of years. But this current is not moving alone. Above it, another force is pushing the Southern Ocean surface almost constantly, the westerly winds that circle Antarctica. Westerly winds, the endless push of the Southern Ocean. The wind over Drake Passage feels different because it has space. In many parts of the world, wind is broken by continents, mountain ranges, forests, cities, and coastlines. In the Southern Ocean, the westerlies can run around the planet with very little land to stop them. They sweep across open water, hour after hour, storm after storm, season after season. These winds are one of the engines of the Southern Ocean. They push on the surface of the sea. They build waves, they influence the movement of water, they help drive upwelling and mixing, they interact with the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, turning the atmosphere and ocean into a coupled system. In Drake Passage, this relationship becomes immediate. The wind does not only create discomfort for ships, it transfers energy into the surface. It pulls waves into shape. It pushes water. It strengthens the feeling that the entire passage is alive with motion. A long fetch, the distance over which wind blows across open water, gives waves time to grow. In the Southern Ocean, that fetch can be enormous. With few continental barriers, waves may travel across wide stretches of ocean before reaching Drake Passage. When storm systems pass through, the sea can shift quickly, from rough to severe, from rolling to violent, from gray movement to walls of cold water. This is why Drake Passage has such a reputation. It sits where wind current and open water meet, with almost no softness between them. The atmosphere is not separate from the ocean here. The sky pushes the sea, and the sea answers. Cinematically, the westerlies are not just wind on a microphone. They are motion in the clouds. They are spray torn from wave crests. They are an albatross barely moving its wings as it rides air that would knock a person off balance. They are the invisible force that turns the surface of the Southern Ocean into a moving skin. If the ACC, as the hidden river below the westerly winds, are the surface engine above. Together, they form a system of pressure and movement. Wind pushes the surface. Current carries the ocean around Antarctica. Eddies and mixing redistribute energy below. The seafloor shapes the pathway, and Drake Passage becomes one of the places where all these forces are forced into close contact. The violence of the surface is therefore not random. It is the visible expression of a much larger system. And when that wind has enough distance to work on the sea, the result is the most famous face of Drake Passage, the Drake Shake. Drake Shake, when the surface becomes the test. Drake Passage is known by two names that feel almost like a joke the ocean tells at human expense. When the sea is unusually calm, travelers call it the Drake Lake. When the passage shows its more famous side, they call it the Drake Shake. But the Drake Shake is not a myth created for adventure stories. It is the surface result of real ocean and atmospheric forces coming together. Strong westerly winds, open Southern Ocean, fetch fast-moving weather systems, and the powerful current beneath. A ship entering this water feels small almost immediately. The bow rises, the horizon disappears behind a swell, the deck shines with cold spray, the ship drops into the trough, then climbs again. Wind moves across the surface so hard that white water tears from the crests. The sea is not simply rough, it feels organized by a scale larger than the vessel. This is where Drake Passage becomes personal. Oceanography can explain current wind pressure and wave growth, but on a ship, the explanation becomes physical. The body feels the lift and fall. The eyes watch the horizon tilt. The ears hear water strike steel. The mind understands, without needing a diagram, that humans are visitors in a system much larger than themselves. Still, this part of the story should not become sensational. Drake Passage is not always violent. Conditions change. Some crossings are rough. Some are surprisingly calm. The same passage that can shake a ship can also lie under a low gray sky with long, slow swells and cold silence. That contrast is part of its character. The important point is that the roughness has causes. Unlike coastal seas protected by land, Drake Passage is exposed to the wide Southern Ocean. Weather systems can move through rapidly. Winds can act across long distances. Waves can build without being interrupted. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current adds another layer of movement beneath the surface. The surface becomes the language of hidden energy. A wave is not only water rising and falling, it is wind history, it is distance, it is pressure, it is weather translated into motion. In Drake Passage, each swell can carry the memory of storms far away. For travelers, the Drake Shake is the most visible challenge. For scientists, it is only the beginning. Because the forces that make Drake Passage important do not stop at the surface. Far below the waves, the shape of the seafloor is quietly controlling how the world's strongest current moves. Seafloor terrain, the invisible hand that bends the current. Beneath Drake Passage, the ocean floor is not flat. It is a hidden landscape of ridges, slopes, basins, fractures, and underwater obstacles. To a ship above, the passage may seem like an open field of water, but to the current below the seafloor is terrain, and terrain matters. Water moving through the ocean does not ignore the bottom. Deep currents feel the shape of the seafloor. Ridges can steer flow. Slopes can guide it. Submarine features can create turbulence, standing meanders, eddies, and mixing. A current as powerful as the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, shaped not only by wind and Earth's rotation, but also by the underwater landscape it passes over. This is the invisible architecture of Drake Passage. On land, we understand that mountains and valleys redirect wind. Air moving through a canyon can accelerate, turn, or become turbulent. In the ocean, something similar can happen with water. When huge volumes of water move across uneven bathymetry, the flow can be bent, squeezed, stirred, or disrupted. This is why seafloor mapping is so important here. A bathymetric map of Drake Passage reveals not emptiness, but complexity. Deep channels and underwater ridges become part of the current's path. Places that look identical from the surface may behave very differently below because the bottom shape changes how water moves above it. Scientists study this because the interaction between the ACC and the seafloor can influence the current's position, strength, and structure. It can affect where eddies form, where mixing is stronger, and how water masses exchange properties. This gives the title its deepest meaning. The hidden power beneath the Southern Ocean is not only water moving fast, it is water moving through a landscape we do not see. A person on deck may think Drake Passage is dangerous because of waves. A scientist looking at instruments sees another danger and another wonder, a deep current being shaped by submarine geography, redistributing heat, salt, nutrients, and energy around Antarctica. This is what makes Drake Passage difficult to fully understand. The surface can be observed from satellites, but the deep interactions require ships, moorings, floats, sonar models, and long-term measurements. Even then, the system is changing constantly. The seafloor is the hand beneath the current, silent, invisible. But powerful enough to help steer one of Earth's largest moving bodies of water. And when current, wind, and seafloor collide, the result is not just speed. It is turbulence eddies and mixing processes that help make the Southern Ocean one of the planet's great climate machines. Eddies and mixing, the climate engine room of the Southern Ocean. The most important movements in Drake Passage are not always the largest ones we can see. Some happen as eddies rotating bodies of water that spin away from the main current, carrying heat, salt, nutrients, and chemical properties across boundaries. Others happen as mixing, where layers of water with different temperatures, salinities, and densities exchange energy and material. These processes are difficult to film, but they are central to the Southern Ocean. An eddy may not look dramatic from the deck of a ship. A mixing layer may not appear as a wave, but in the ocean's climate system, these hidden motions matter enormously. They help determine how heat moves into the ocean interior, how carbon is taken up or released, how nutrients return toward the surface, and how water masses are transformed. Drake Passage is one of the places where these processes become intense because several forces overlap. The A-bow sea flows through a narrow gateway. Westerly winds push the surface. Seafloor terrain disrupts and guides the current. Temperature and salinity differences create layers and fronts. The result is an ocean that is not simply flowing, but stirring. This is where the Southern Ocean becomes more than a cold ring of water around Antarctica. It becomes a climate engine. NOAA research has described the Southern Ocean as a major buffer against climate change because it absorbs a large share of excess heat and a major portion of the human-produced carbon dioxide taken up by the ocean. That ability depends on exchange between the atmosphere's surface water and deeper layers. It depends on motion that is not always visible. When deep water rises toward the surface, it can bring nutrients that support plankton. When surface water sinks or mixes downward, it can carry heat and carbon into the ocean interior. Eddies can move properties across the fronts of the AIC. Mixing can help connect layers that would otherwise remain more separate. This is why Drake Passage matters far beyond its location. A rough crossing to Antarctica is only the human-scale version of the story. The planetary version is larger, a remote passage, helping regulate the exchange of heat, carbon, and nutrients in one of the most important oceans for Earth's climate. Cinematically, this section should feel like going beneath the visible storm. The camera leaves the waves and enters an animation of currents, colors, layers, and spinning eddies. Surface wind becomes arrows. Deep flow becomes bands of blue. The seafloor rises as a hidden ridge. Water curls, lifts, sinks, and mixes. The audience begins to feel that Drake Passage is not just wild, it is functional. It is a room in the planet's machinery, cold, violent, and difficult to access, but essential. And inside this machinery, life still exists, not with tropical color, but with precision built around cold season plankton and krill. Life in the rough water, krill seabirds, whales and seals. Drake Passage and the waters around Antarctica can look too harsh for abundance. The sea is cold, the wind is strong, the sky can remain gray for days. Waves move through the passage with a weight that makes the ocean feel hostile. There are no coral reefs, no mangrove lagoons, no tropical colors to suggest an easy richness. And yet, the Southern Ocean can be full of life. At the center of that life is Antarctic krill. Krill are small crustaceans, but their ecological role is enormous. They feed on phytoplankton and algae, including algae associated with sea ice. In turn, they become a vital food source for whales, seals, penguins, fish, and seabirds. In a cold ocean, these tiny animals help support some of the largest creatures on Earth. This is one of the great contrasts of the Antarctic region. A world that seems empty from the surface may be organized around swarms of small life. Krill gather energy from the lower food web and make it available to animals far larger than themselves. A whale feeding in Antarctic waters is not simply chasing prey. It is feeding on the productivity of cold water, seasonal light, and microscopic plants transformed through krill. Seabirds reveal the surface layer of this ecosystem. Albatrosses and petrels glide over the wind with astonishing efficiency, using air currents that make Drake Passage difficult for ships but useful for wings. Penguins depend on the sea for food. Seals dive into cold water to hunt. Whales arrive when feeding conditions allow. Life here is not easy. It is timed. Phytoplankton bloom when light and nutrients align. Krill respond to food and sea ice conditions. Predators respond to krill. Whales follow seasonal abundance. Penguins and seals depend on access to prey during critical periods. In the Southern Ocean, survival often means being in the right place during a short window of opportunity. This makes the wildlife of Drake Passage and nearby Antarctic waters feel different from tropical abundance. It is not constant color. It is concentration. It is season. It is patience, endurance, and adaptation to cold. A whale surfacing in these waters carries the entire system in its breath. Beneath that moment are winds currents, nutrients, plankton, krill, and migration. A seabird riding the wind is part of the same machinery that drives the waves. A seal disappearing below the surface enters the food web built by cold water and seasonal light. Drake Passage may be harsh, but it is not empty. Its roughness is part of the system that helps feed life. And yet, even the strongest ocean systems can change. The final mystery of Drake Passage is not only what lies beneath it today, but how its hidden forces may shift in a warming world. The future of Drake Passage. When hidden power begins to change rhythm. Drake Passage feels timeless, but it is not frozen outside history. The winds can change, the ocean can warm, sea ice can shift. Fresh water from melting ice can alter surface conditions. The balance between deep water, surface water carbon uptake, and heat storage can change in ways scientists are still working to understand. The Southern Ocean is one of the hardest places on Earth to observe consistently. It is remote, stormy, cold, and expensive to study. Ships face rough seas. Instruments must survive pressure, ice storms, and distance. Satellites can see the surface, but many of the most important processes happen below. This is why every measurement matters. Afloat, drifting through the Southern Ocean, a mooring measuring current speed in Drake Passage, a research vessel crossing a storm belt, a satellite reading sea surface height. Each one adds a small piece to a system too large for any single expedition to capture. Scientific reports have described substantial warming in the Southern Ocean, with future changes influenced by greenhouse gases, ozone recovery, precipitation, sea, ice shelves, ice sheets, and freshwater input. These changes matter because the Southern Ocean is not isolated from the rest of the planet. It helps absorb heat and carbon. It helps regulate deep ocean exchange. It helps support krill and the food webs that depend on them. If Drake Passage is a choke point in global circulation, then changes here are not only local, a shift in winds can influence current behavior and upwelling. Warming can change water properties. Fresh water from melting ice can affect density and stratification. Changes in sea ice can affect algae and krill habitat. Altered mixing can influence how heat and carbon move between the atmosphere and the deep ocean. This is the modern meaning of Uncharted. Not unknown on a map. Unknown in its future. We know where Drake Passage is. We know ships cross it. We know the ACC flows through it. We know the winds can be severe and the waves can be enormous. But we do not yet know every consequence of a changing climate on this cold, deep, powerful gateway. The future of Drake Passage should not be told with panic. It should be told with respect. Because the more scientists study this place, the clearer it becomes that remote does not mean irrelevant. Some of the places farthest from human cities are deeply connected to the conditions that make human life possible. Drake Passage is one of those places. A rough, gray, isolated stretch of water near Antarctica may help shape heat transport, carbon uptake, marine productivity, and the circulation of the global ocean. And perhaps the most astonishing thing about Drake Passage is not how violent it can look on the surface. It is how quietly it helps keep part of the planet's ocean rhythm moving. Drake Passage is not only a stretch of water ships cross on the way to Antarctica. It is a narrow gateway between two continents where westerly winds run almost unblocked waves can grow across open ocean, and the Antarctic Circumpolar Current is forced through like a giant river without banks. On the surface, humans see wind spray cold water and gray waves. But below, there are forces harder to see, deep currents, eddies, seafloor ridges, mixing layers, pressure changes, and water masses carrying heat, salt, nutrients, and carbon around the planet. That is the hidden power of Drake Passage. Not the power of one storm, not the power of one wave, but the power of a system moving continuously, linking the Atlantic, Pacific, Southern Ocean, Antarctic life, and Earth's climate. And when a ship crosses that water, it is not only crossing one of the roughest passages on Earth, it is passing over one of the coldest, deepest, and most powerful engine rooms of the planet.